So welcome everyone to our Fashion Means Business Fashion Talks. And this week we're going to be looking at sustainability and social impact for African suppliers. Thank you, Liza, very much for joining us today. Just by way of introduction, in 2015, McKinsey conducted a study into global sourcing. They collected responses from European clothing brands to their sourcing questionnaire. For the first time, African nations appeared on the list of countries expected to play a more important role in clothing manufacturing. H&M, Primark, and Tesco are just a handful of retailers that have been sourcing from Ethiopia since 2013. Over the years, there's been rising interest in not just Ethiopia, but also other East African countries as potential sourcing destinations, helped by the renewal of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which gives certain countries in sub-Saharan Africa duty-free access to the US market. We are joined today by Liza Colbeck, who is founder of In Our Name fashion label, made in Africa, and sells directly to consumers and through Wolf & Badger. She has a wealth of experience in the fashion industry, working for more than 25 years in brands across Europe, the Americas, and Asia. She's also experienced in strategic supply chain developments for various governments. Liza was born in Kenya and has a vested interest in the country. She made the decision in 2020 to focus on harnessing and developing the creativity and skills of small, locally owned manufacturers in Africa into a sustainable economic and marketable partnership aimed at improving their production capabilities and access to the global market. And hence, In Our Name was launched. So Liza, thank you very much for joining us today and for first of all giving us insights into your recently launched brand, but also to outline some of the challenges, some of the journey that you've been through to actually get to this stage of actually launching your label. So I'm going to hand over to you just to let everyone know that there is time at the end for questions. So please, if you have any questions, save them for the end and we will happily answer them. So thank you, Liza, over to you.
Thank you, Hannah, for the introduction, and thank you all for having me this afternoon. As Hannah said, I recently launched a sustainable and social impact brand to help change the perception of Africa. I'll share with you my take on sustainability in a global context, but also how it relates to African producers and to all of us in one form or another. So why? What we really want to do as a brand is to create an environmentally responsible brand and create an economic ecosystem for the manufacturers in Africa. One of the challenges that African producers have is capital, particularly local manufacturers. There are big factories, like Hannah has alluded, in Ethiopia, Lesotho, Kenya as well, Rwanda, but they're all either Chinese, Taiwanese, Vietnamese, or Sri Lankan. They have a lot of capital, they have a lot of resources, and they scoop up sort of the whole value chain and sort of leaves the local manufacturers depleted. So this is something that was an obvious opportunity when I did some work for the African Union a few years ago. And that's why I'm focusing on small manufacturers rather than the large scale manufacturers, because they're already established. They don't need my expertise, they don't need my input. So we're committing to building a responsible and purpose-driven community. We focus on sustainability, being responsible, and also social, and that's the social element is the social impact element, so the people element. And everything is made in Africa. So we manufacture exclusively in Africa. So my journey. So as Hannah said, I've been around for a little while. I've worked in most continents really. And really the opportunity I had with traveling a lot gave me a great insight into the different industries that I worked in. I worked in manufacturing, retail, I've worked with venture capitalists, I've done social impact work in Thailand and Vietnam, and working with governments. So why Africa? I was born in Kenya, so I'm familiar with the culture and the geography. It's a vibrant, great place. And most people are familiar with a certain narrative of what Africa is, but actually Africa is very different to what we see in the press, what we see as, you know, the interpretation of what how people live, or how people conduct themselves, or how people run their businesses. But actually it's a great place. There's 54 countries, thousands of languages. West Africa is very French, East Africa is very English speaking, and Sub-Saharan Africa is quite Portuguese speaking. So it was the evolution of the continent as it grew. It's the youngest continent in the world, so there is great potential in terms of diversifying from agriculture into consumer-led products. Africa is known, I believe it's one of the largest importers of Chinese product, so cheap, high volume product, because there is an established industry in Africa to manufacture those consumer products, but that is changing. So it's a great place to be now. The infrastructure is changing, so access to ports, access to transport, and so on is great. And Africa is the leader in mobile phone adoption. So they're tech savvy, know what's going on in the world, great communicators, always on the phone, like to have a chat. Mobile data is very, very cheap in Africa. So it's quite an interesting insight. So what does sustainability mean, which is what we're really talking about today? It could be a whole load of things. It depends on who you talk to, where you're coming from, and what your business objectives are. So all these things could potentially be, I think that's the last one. I wasn't sure how many I put up. It could be everything on this page and a lot more. There's a lot more to sustainability than a lot of brands claim when they say, you know, we use clean viscose. Well, what does that really mean? That's really not sustainable. You're using a sustainable fabric, but your whole ethos is not sustainable. So what does it mean to us? So what we've decided to do is we've adopted the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. There are 17, and it's worth looking at because this is where the world is moving, because the advantage of the United Nations Sustainability Goals is it gives you a rough roadmap as to what the objective should be. You can pick and choose elements of it because not all elements are relevant, but it's a great place to start because there's just a lot of noise out there. And this is quite a nice linear way to pick out sustainability goals that mean something to you, and you can make a positive impact rather than just accepting, adopting them as, just something to market as a marketing tool. So what we've done is we've adopted 4: gender equality. That's for women and girls in the workplace. There are obviously cultural issues in Africa around work, but that is definitely changing. But generally speaking, as it is in the West, women earn less than men. So that is no different. So that is something that is important to us. And we tend to try and work with manufacturers that employ a large number of women, or the artisans we work with are women. Decent work and economic growth. I'll come back to this because this is what we've used as a basis for our social impact as a funnel in terms of what we're doing. So it's about sustainable economic growth. Historically, not even that long ago, but there's a lot of brands that go to Africa and create a little range and use it to market. They're doing this great social stuff in Africa, but then they leave a vacuum. The season ends, the trends change, and all these artisans that they've been working with sort of end up in no man's land. So what we're trying to do is to create a more sustainable business, as in the sales aspect, so we can just create this sort of demand, constant demand for their work. Responsible consumption and production. So every touch point, every element of the product is considered. So right down to the sewing thread, the button, there are very specific things that we won't do, won't accept. On our website, I'll give you the link at the end of the talk. There is a section on every product page giving advice on how to wash a garment. It might sound really basic, but there is some sense in it, because if you start off with a good quality product, there's no reason why it can't last 20 years, unless of course you change shape, but you know, you could potentially wear the same thing. So, and the final one that we've adopted is climate action. So, what are we doing to mitigate the negative impact on the environment? So we're doing several things. So how do we translate those 4 sustainable development goals? We've created 3 funnels. So we've got people. Rather than referring to the sustainable goals, we've just narrowed it down to people, the environment, and the economic aspect. But all of them have common elements across all 4. So with people, we promote decent working conditions, equal pay, ensure women are treated fairly, and we promote positive social impact. So what are we doing as a brand? We don't work in territories without a minimum wage in Africa, which is a huge issue for workers in Ethiopia and Rwanda. There is no minimum wage. So these large manufacturers and the retailers that we all buy from manufacture in Rwanda and also manufacture in Ethiopia and Lesotho. There's no minimum wage. You know, the workers are paid $40 a month, which is nothing. So we will not source from any of those territories. We will only source from territories that have a minimum wage, and a minimum wage that is closer to a living wage. We apply industry best practice, ILO principles, that's International Labour Organization, and territory laws. So we respect the local laws. We promote safe working conditions in the environment. We support manufacturing. We're supporting our current manufacturer to work towards an ethical audit. We have one factory that we've been successful with in terms of integrating best practice, and he's been preparing his factory for an audit. It's only a small factory, he employs 45 people, but he's seeing the benefit of having a compliant factory that is audited, and his audit is on the 15th. So I've only just come back. I arrived from Kenya this morning. I spent a little longer than I was expecting to help him prepare. And all of this is pro bono, so I don't charge. It's using my best practice. And once we've created a framework with this particular factory, we're hoping to then do a cookie cutter and apply the same lessons that we've learned and apply them to different factories. While I was in Kenya, actually, we created some KPI frameworks for certain people in the factory so that they can evolve and grow. So somebody that started off trimming can work their way up to supervisor level, so they have something to work towards. Again, that gives them great incentive and gives them some self-worth and purpose, because they're just not seen as a trimmer or the cleaner or, you know, whatever. Our second pillar is the environment. So it's all the things that everybody's talking about: energy, water, chemical management, pollution, using organic materials, sustainable materials, and being animal friendly. But what do we do as a brand? All our fabrics and yarns are either sustainable or organic. So we don't use polyester, whether it's recycled or not, because polyester or nylon are not biodegradable. So we don't use any of those fabrics. We don't use plastic buttons either. We don't use buttons from the sea, so no mother of pearl buttons, because you're exploiting the resources from the oceans. So we only use tegua nut buttons, which is another name is corroso buttons. They are also biodegradable at the end of their lives, so that's quite useful. All our sewing threads are recycled. They are polyester, but they are recycled. But we are working on a biodegradable sewing thread. So that should kick in for autumn winter 22. So the technology isn't quite there, so we're sort of keeping tabs on that. All our poly bags are made out of sugarcane, and they are biodegradable. Our e-commerce bags, the bags that we use to send out to customers, are from recycled plastic. It's very hard to find durable fabric, plastic that can withstand couriers and be biodegradable. So that is still an area of evolution, but we're doing what we can, not perfect, but better. We also offset our carbon emissions through a reforestation project. So the picture on that screen is Mount Kenya. So we've teamed up with a trust on Mount Kenya. It's called Mount Kenya Trust, and we offset all our carbon emissions. Because obviously I'm traveling to Kenya, we're using couriers, we're sending fabrics. So we document absolutely everything, including all the courier packages out to customers, and we offset that. Because we can't not use planes, we can't not use couriers, we can't not use, we need to move around, but what can we do? So they've had a lot of deforestation, so that's a great project to be involved in. So from an economic perspective, what we're trying to do is create sustainable business models for the small manufacturers, as I alluded to earlier, the micro enterprises. So a little workshop with 2 or 3 people, that's a micro enterprise, and then the artisans tend to work quite solo, quite sort of solo workers, and they'll do sort of the entire process themselves. So we're trying to promote a production ecosystem that can sell continually to a global market, which is what I was saying earlier around brands creating this whole idea that they're helping or creating the sustainable supply chain in Africa, and then once the trend's finished, they're off. So we're trying to create something that is contemporary and global, with a global appeal that won't date. It's not ethnic, but it has sort of an attraction to the consumer. But equally, we have to grow our own distribution to create an economic domino effect. So if the brand isn't successful, we can't actually do all these great things. So the front end, the consumer end, is just as important, because if we can't sell product, then we can't really do all the stuff that we want to do. So what we're doing, we're training the manufacturers on production best practice and quality standards. We're mentoring artisans on costing, scaling production, and critical path management, because we all work to seasons, we all work to buying calendars, we all work to budgets. It can't be open-ended. And actually, quite a few of them have been receptive. I'm still struggling with explaining economies of scale. So when you ask for a price for one item, and you say, well, what would it be for 100 or 200? They don't understand economies of scale. So we're trying to work with them on that. And then supporting business development. So communication, accuracy, following the technical sheets, all of that stuff that all contributes to a successful sort of economic ecosystem. So our social impact. So what are the facts around why we've decided to focus on social impact? 60% of the global working population is employed in the informal sector. So that is people building things, or like this artisan making jewelry. But 85% of those are actually in Africa. So there's a great opportunity to harness that population, harness that skill. I did a lot of work in Thailand and Vietnam, and they had some incredible outcomes because what they did is they created little cooperatives, so a little production hub, if you like. And that worked a lot better because you can specialize, you can negotiate prices, you have a broader view on material costs and so on. And in Africa, the informal sector is the backbone of the economies. So that is data from the ILO. So what we've called our initiative, the 100% initiative, because we are contributing 100% of all our net profits go back to the artisans. As we're still quite small, we haven't really gained the traction in terms of volume, but so I'm funding it personally. So to try and gain the traction, but once we gain the traction, the profits from the business, rather than me funding it, will go directly to the artisans, so we can create this incredible thing that we saw in Thailand. This is interesting because what tends to happen is families tend to live together. So if you have one person who's an artisan, you know, the brother will be helping out, or the wife will be helping out, and it becomes a very localized little hub. So this would be great to create like an economic domino effect within communities. And even if we, you know, I'm not looking to change the world, but if you can make a difference to a handful of people, or a large handful of people, or a few hundred people, you know, it makes doing this really worthwhile. And by helping market their product, we're helping them break barriers entering the market. You know, selling abroad, exporting is a dream for a lot of these people. You know, having access to a foreign market is a dream for a lot of these people. And because they tend to get exploited by brokers. So the brokers will screw them on price and then sell them on to, you know, sell them on Etsy or some of those other platforms. And so they don't actually benefit as much as they should for the effort that they put in. So it is a tough call. It is really challenging getting this artisan piece working. But, you know, we're sticking to our goal, and we're sticking to our objective, and it'll work. It'll all come together. But that is our 100% initiative. So everything that we do within sustainability, we've created a little icon, and the icon is really is a consumer facing visual. So we've got them for everything. So artisans, fibers, reduced water, and my happy sheep. So we use sustainably sourced wool. And how does that look like in terms of messaging online? So this is a screenshot from our website. The fabric, the green fabric, is Ecovero viscose, and the bag is an artisan bag. So that is one of the items that we made with the artisans in the summer. And you'll see at the bottom of the description, there are little icons. And if you hover over the icons, you get a little bit of information on each one. So this is an artisan one. So you can see the hand is an artisan, 100% is 100% initiative. And the recycled is, we use recycled brass for our jewelry. And the recycled brass comes from taps, like old brass taps or brass pipes. It's amazing going to these workshops. And that's how we message. All our products are quite contemporary. We don't want the product to date or to be too season-led. So when there's an ethnic print trend, everybody runs around, you know, developing ethnic prints. All our prints are designed are based on something in Africa, so animals or plants or flowers. And this is a sort of a cross-section of some of the products. So the middle one is butterfly wings. So we call that Kpi red, which means butterfly, and the bottom is Kpi green. And this, the one on the bottom left is a baobab tree, knitted in jacquard in Mauritius using organic cotton and sustainable wool. And the one at the top are Cape daisies. So we try and relate everything to nature. Again, all this is, that's a seed pod print in the middle, and the one on the top right is pollen. So we're selling directly on our e-commerce site, and we're also drop shipping through Wolf and Badger. We've had a really good run on Wolf and Badger, and they promote us a lot, which is great. We also have our social in our name on Instagram and the community on Facebook. And we're trying to make a change. And that's me done, Hannah.
Thank you very much, Liza. Some really interesting insights. The room is open up to questions. If anyone has any questions, please do just put them into the chat. Liza, I know that you found this a real challenge, sort of actually trying to set up in our name. Can you maybe just talk through some of the hurdles that you faced?
Yeah, I mean, you're starting from ground zero. So however well connected you are in the industry, you're still starting from ground zero. So it starts with your concept. So that's the easy piece, really. But trying to get fabrics that are fully traceable, fully, a proper chain of custody, and you're not buying 1,000 meters, you want 50 meters. I had to do a lot of begging to have, to get the fabrics. Finding manufacturers was also a challenge. I was talking to manufacturers in Ghana, in Nigeria, and in Kenya. And coincidentally, the one that seemed to get the sort of forward plan, the sort of macro objective was a Kenyan manufacturer. And that kind of worked better for me because, it's a geography I'm familiar with. I can navigate my way around on my own. So so things like that, and then trying to find a fulfillment center, because I don't, you want to focus on developing the business and working on your values, whatever your values are. And nobody wants to work with a startup, so that was a real challenge. I mean, I'll be honest with you, there hasn't been anything that's been easy. The idea was the easy part, but executing it was really, when you're starting from zero, I've written to maybe 15 magazines, not one's ever responded. It's tough. It's because there's so much noise, and the bigger players have big budgets. They have big marketing budgets. They have, they can buy a spread in a magazine or and there's hundreds and thousands of people like us who are making really quite honest change, and not doing it because we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because we're ticking a box. So a lot of issues, and it's not going to stop. It'll always be the problem, because you're trying to do something in a very holistic, in a very organic, wholesome way that it's not people up in Manchester who are selling a top for £3.99 or a dress for £3.99. Their value structure is completely different, but they have huge budgets. So that's a challenge. So it's just not me, but I'm sure a lot of people in the same space have the same issues.
Do you find that it's it's more the bigger players that are looking to Africa at the moment, or are there others like yourself who are looking to work with the artisans and you know, more of these sort of, like you kind of alluded to, the kind of small sort of family hubs, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, Africa is a challenge, right? So I've had lots of my peers, you know, people I've worked with over the years saying, I'm mad, you know, you could do the same thing out of India, or you could do the same thing out of China, which is true, but that's not what I want to do. You know, I've chosen the rough road. And the thing with Africa is they cannot compete with China or India, because they're miles apart in terms of skill, in terms of access to the number of workers that can, you know, just jump on a machine or jump on a cutting table. They just don't have that pool of skill. But that's not to say you can't start somewhere and you can't make it worth something. It doesn't have to be grand. And I guess it's, you know, Ethiopia's been taken off AGOA from the 1st of January because of the political issues. I don't know if you know about this. So I mean, these factories are half a mile long, you know, they're huge factories, they employ thousands of people. What they're going to do, you know, it's a tough call. Africa is politically unstable. That's a fact. It's not, you know, that's just a fact of the matter. It is an unstable continent in terms of politics. So you take a risk.
It's a risk you're prepared to take, which is really admirable. I've just got a question that's coming from Dr. Stina Hedgegard. She says, very interesting talk, Liza. Thank you very much. Great initiative. Stina is familiar with a couple of similar initiatives, like In Love with Africa, but they didn't seem to stay in business. What do you think, I mean, the barriers and hurdles to actually staying in business? So, you know, you've set up In Our Name, you're about to get the factory audited, but what actually are the barriers to sort of staying in business, I suppose?
It's a capital, so it's the financial aspect. I think that's one really key aspect. You risk running out of money, because as you know, if you're making 10 units per style, you need to sell them for 500, 600 pounds to make a decent profit. But you know how many people are in that market? So it's, you know, I'm fortunate in as much as that's what I've done my entire working life. You know, I know how to work a supply chain, and how to, you know, cost, you know, I cost down to the thread consumption. You can't leave anything to chance. And I think it's just having transparency of your costs, having full visibility of your inventory, whether it's materials or whether it's finished product, but also pricing yourself so that you're not too expensive, but also you're not too cheap. So you're good value for money. And quite a few of the brands that I've seen in Africa, you know, sell for a lot of money, and you're competing at the entry price point of the premium brands, you know. So what is your proposition? You have to have a proposition that's a broad appeal. I'm not saying I've got it all sorted, but I kind of know that if I come across an obstacle, I can be objective about stepping back and thinking, why has that happened? I'm thinking, well, maybe it's the price, maybe it's the color, maybe it's the shape, maybe it's, you know, my messaging, or, you know, you can step back and be as objective as you can. And also, I would say the last thing is access to market. So you know, I have a distribution strategy, and, you know, my strategy is to go slow. I don't want to rush. And you have to partner with people distribution partners who have similar values as you. They don't have to be exact same values, but for argument's sake, I couldn't pitch to Pretty Little Thing. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't pitch them a proposition because it just wouldn't work. So I just think access to market and understanding market is really important.
I think Wolf and Badger is a good partner, given that they're B Corp.
Yes, I know. We're working towards B Corp, by the way.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Another string to your bow. I know prior to this talk, we've had conversations about the challenges you faced in actually finding fabric made in Africa, which you know, given the amount of cotton that comes out of Africa, perhaps you could just explain a little bit of the challenges that you faced in finding fabrics from Africa for your African label.
Yes, so some context. So most of the cotton grown in Africa is exported because there isn't a vertical supply chain to process the cotton into fiber, into yarn into fabric. So most cotton goes out, is processed, and is re-imported as finished. Not all of it, but it's about 80%. It's quite a large percentage. So there isn't a vertical supply chain. So that's one thing. But the second thing is, it's all about economics. So the mills in Africa have a huge local market, a huge domestic market. And the domestic market isn't asking about, you know, what's your effluence policy? What's your environmental policy? You know, so they're not interested in working with somebody who has an expectation as to, you know, quite important issues, because I'm a small fish, and you know they're selling millions of meters a year to the local market, so they don't see the value. That's the unfortunate thing. A lot of the mills don't see the value. So I've spoken to quite a few mills, and the current market is so big, they're just not interested in being compliant. You know, I haven't given up, so I'm still looking. I'm a hopeless optimist, so I'm still looking. But what that has led me to do is I have to import all the fabrics, because I can't put a claim or say this is sustainable viscose. Well, what does that mean? You know, I have to go verify the mill. So all my fabrics come from a mill in Turkey. And they're certified, you know, they're audited, they're all compliant. So that gives me comfort. So when I say our fabrics are 100% sustainable or organic, I know for a fact that they are. And that, yeah, I couldn't work any other way. If I was working for another retailer and that was their brand proposition, that's a different thing. But I don't think that's the way forward. I don't think that's the future.
As being true to your values, and in order to be true to your values, you need that transparency.
Oh, without a doubt. And you know, we don't brand ourselves as a sustainable brand, because I think that should be the common denominator. That should be the common standard that everybody works to. But you know, using organic cotton doesn't mean you're sustainable. It just means that you've bought organic, you know, simple things like payment terms. I mean, you'll understand this, you know, 60-day payment terms, 90-day payment terms to suppliers. So suppliers have to cut corners because they're financing all these big multi-billion-dollar businesses because they're all on 60 or 90-day payment terms. Do you know what I mean? So you can't claim that you're sustainable or your sustainability credentials are using organic cotton. How are you treating the people within your supply chain? That's about treating people with respect, or treating people as they should, whatever level, you know, whether it's a cutter or a cleaner or, you know, a business owner. Yeah. The difference is the same.
And part of the sustainability strategy. Mm. Brilliant, great. Do we have any other questions from the audience? No, I take that as a no. Lisa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. I hope there is good news from the audit.
Oh, it will. We worked hard. 5 weeks I was there.
And it'd be really interesting to see the outcome of your kind of blueprint, I suppose, and see if, you know, going forward, that is something that you're able to roll out to other factories and really sort of make a difference, I suppose. Small difference, but over time, potentially a big difference. So thank you very much, Liza. I really appreciate your time. And thank you to all of those who've attended today. See you all in a couple of weeks for the next talk. Thank you, Liza.